Hey guys, welcome back. Eric Smith here, Five Reasons Sports contributor, also co host of Scouting the Fins that you can find on the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed, and also the Five Reasons YouTube. This is not my typical format. I've been out of town since last Thursday. I was in Virginia Beach for my daughter's field hockey tournament, and I've been following along but haven't been very active on social media. I've been following the camp reports, typically anywhere they come out. The ones that I use are Alpha Artiaga from 3 Yards Per Carry, Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins, and of course Travis Wingfield of Drive Time with the Dolphins. I am back home for a few days, and then I am flying out on Thursday to go down to Miami and attend practices on Friday and Saturday before I come back home and get ready to start heat acclimation for the high school season. Before this week's practices start, I just wanted to get my thoughts out on some things that happened while I was away. First one, Aaron Brewer being inactive to start the camp. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets, removed and is able to practice today. Andrew Meyer has been the one getting those starting reps, but I wouldn't look too much into that with Liam also on the physically unable to perform. Meyer was the only center left on the roster with any kind of center experience until they signed Dan Brunskill, who is, new to the offense. Bayron Matos suffered an injury that resulted in losing feeling to certain parts of his body. By all accounts, seems like he's doing well and expected, back at practice. Wishing the best for him. After that injury, they signed Obina Ize, probably not pronouncing that right. Released Teddy Kushi as the corresponding move there. He was a undrafted free agent in 2022. I guess he was one of the players trying to make the roster that was featured on 2022 Hard Knocks for the Lions. He didn't make the 53, spent the season on the practice squad. Next year, he signed with the Steelers. He was cut 3 weeks later, signed with the Michigan Panthers of the USFL for a few days. He then signed with the Jets. 2024 didn't make the 53-man roster for the Jets and spent the year on the practice squad. 2025, he signed a futures contract with the Jets in January, but then was released July 22nd and signed with the Dolphins on July 24th. I don't know anything about him. Not expecting a whole lot at this point until I start, seeing some stuff from him coming out of the training camp reports. Another thing that we got was confirmation that Jonah Williams is scheduled to play left guard in this offense, and that was, a mold that I discussed since the beginning of the free agency period in terms of what I expected for left guard versus right guard. That left guard being more of your, more stout, wide body type guy. I had listed Savaianai as an option at left guard multiple times for the Dolphins, and it was just kind of nice to see that prediction come to fruition after I got a lot of pushback on that it made more sense for him to be on the right side, and a lot of that had to do with the veteran aspect, having him next to Austin Jackson instead of Patrick Paul. Dolphins also signed Jack Jones, kind of a smaller corner at 5'11", 175. Going back to college, he committed to USC in 2016, and he was dismissed from there for academic struggles. Played at a JUCO called Moore Park College. He was there to improve his grades before committing to Arizona State. Fourth round pick in 2022 by the Patriots. He played there in 2022 and part of 2023, appearing in 18 games, starting 2 of them. 2023, he entered the season as the starter but suffered a hamstring injury prior to week 1 that put him on injured reserve until October 21st. He then started 2 games before missing curfew before the Commanders game. He played a reduced role against the Commanders and then a career low 10 snaps versus the Colts the following week, and then he got released the next day. The day after that, he was claimed by the Raiders and reunited with his former high school and college coach in Antonio Pierce. He was, then released on April 6th by the Raiders, and then July 26th, 2025, signed with the Dolphins. Departure from the Raiders, in addition to, some of the maturity or I don't want to say off-field stuff, probably had a lot to do with the new staff, right? He went to the Raiders because of Antonio Pierce, probably had a big influence in that. And the new staff with Pete Carroll, if you remember back to those Seattle defenses, more likes more of the bigger, more physical corners like the Richard Shermans, the Byron Maxwells, those type of players. But he, clearly between the not able to keep his grades up and then the curfew issues, has had some maturity issues in the past. On the field, a bit of a gambler, and I'm okay with that. Miami was trending towards playing with some really young cornerbacks and having to protect them with, the veteran safeties behind them. And now instead of just hoping that the young guys can keep their heads above water, while expecting them to have some of those hiccups, you've got a more experienced player there, and it's at a low risk contract. And he's still going to have those hiccups in terms of, whether he's, taking chances or, maybe not in the coverage he's supposed to be, but, you're still going to have to protect him with those safeties. But the flip side of that is while you're going to have hiccups with the young guys and with Jack Jones brings some true ball skills and game changing ability. So I like that. I like that pick. I think that it shows that they have some confidence in the young guys. They didn't go with the, I would say, safer pick in a Rajul Douglas, but going with more of the high risk, high reward type player in a Jack Jones. Dolphins also started the Miami Dolphins orange jersey fan of the day. That was just for the last practice they had. No surprise, once I saw that Ian Berger was in attendance, that he got that jersey. Most deserving fan ever for that. Ian is currently in the hospital. Wishing him the best as always. Kader Kohu had a non-contact injury in a one-on-one drill versus Tyreek Hill. He limped off the field, but was, reported that he was doing better as time went on. And Cam Wolf said that he walked by their set and seemed to be walking fine. Probably going to get more from Coach McDaniel on that today, but, for now I'm expecting good news until we don't get it. After that practice, they also signed Mike Hilton, so that's another smaller corner at 5'9", 184 pounds. He is 31 years old, and he was listed as a safety, but this is a guy that I haven't really gotten to watch the film on. But by all accounts, he's more strictly just a slot corner. He's played 8 seasons in the NFL, 4 of those with the Steelers and 4 with the Bengals. In his 4 years with the Steelers, he played about 60% of snaps every season. And then with the Bengals was up to about 75% of snaps in those 4 years. This is a guy that I think brings veteran leadership to a young group, adds an additional option to one of the most difficult positions to play in the defense, which is that slot defender. And by all accounts, this is a strong signing who was likely only available because of his age and the limited role available. Not going to be asking him to play outside in this defense. I think the Dolphins have, some bigger guys that are more suited to do that. And hopefully, even though I'm not expecting, Pro Bowl player or anything like that, his experience should help to bridge the gap to the younger guys, until they're ready to play at a high level. Christian Wilkins, right, released by the Raiders, supposedly had an incident with a teammate that led to the release by the Raiders. I'm not interested in him coming back to the Dolphins, in big part because I feel like it would stunt the growth of some of these young guys that we just brought in, like Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips. And he's going to be still recovering from what appears to be a significant foot injury. Former teammate John Feliciano had tweeted that Wilkins was, he said, always been a little freaky, and that's not surprising when you go back to some of the incidents that he had on the field with grabbing players at Clemson and with Miami. Particularly an incident with Josh Allen. And for me, he's always come across as a guy that could definitely be taken the wrong way. And I'm not trying to compare the two at all in terms of the severity of the incidents, but this has a bit of a Richie Incognito vibe in terms of a player who did certain things and was accepted by one locker room, or at least parts of that locker room, and then he goes somewhere else and it's not received the same way. So he was the first pick of the Brian Flores era in Miami, and I think that's where he probably ends up going to the Vikings and playing under Flores here. if he's ready to play in 2025. And then last thing I wanted to touch on before wrapping this up is the Minka Fitzpatrick restructure. So, you know, I've expected this since the trade, since the last 2 years of his contract had no guaranteed money. It was just a matter of what this looked like and whether they were going to be adding new money to it. So the contract that he came with had non-guaranteed base salaries of 15.5 million in 2025 and about 17.5 in 2026. So essentially what they did with this was to swap those numbers. And then they took that 17.5 that Minka is now getting in 2025. They dropped it down to the minimum base salary of about 1.25 million. And then the rest of it gets converted to a signing bonus that's spread out over the next 2 years of the contract and 3 void years afterwards. So that's a $3.25 million cap hit each of the next 5 years for the signing bonus portion getting spread out. So the net result for the Dolphins is a $11 million cap savings in 2025. And, obviously guarantees that money since it is in the form of a signing bonus. And Minka wasn't getting cut in 2025, so you were paying him the 15 and a half no matter what. And it's common practice to take big numbers like that base salary and convert it into a signing bonus to spread the cap head out. The cap savings that they got was likely needed for some guys like Jack Jones and Mike Hilton, and gives them some flexibility in the future. And I think there's a really high likelihood that we end up with a new contract for Minka in 2026 based on how he plays. So don't expect this to be the last time that we hear about a Minka contract. And it's not a bad thing or players unhappy. It's just that he's going to enter the last year of the contract again with no guaranteed money. And that new contract that he signs next year is going to be based on how he plays in 2025. So, I think that we can really expect the best version of what Minka has left in the tank in 2025 here. So I think that touches on everything that I wanted to, give my thoughts on here heading into week 2 of practices. Like I said, I'm going to be down in Miami later this week. So if you're going to be at practice, hit me up, say hi. And other than that, as always, appreciate you guys watching, and we will talk again soon.